Christ of St. John of the Cross by Salvador Dali, a video to support the sermon in the Seeing Salvation series at the Metropolitan Community Church of Manchester. The painting we looked at on Sunday, Dali's Christ of St. John of the Cross, is one of Dali's religious paintings. He was a Spanish Catalan artist. Originally he trained as a draftsman, but later he studied art. He was, however, expelled from art school for saying that there was no one clever enough to examine him. At art school he had a close friendship with gay artist Garcia Lorca, but it's thought that they were never lovers. Dali is known as being part of the art movement called Surrealism. This was an artistic and cultural movement which sprang from the 1920s. Surrealist art is full of surprises, with images juxtaposed in ways which shock and which don't seem to go together. This painting, called Bomb, mixes the image of a human head and a mushroom cloud, and dates from the post-war nuclear era. In this picture, Ghost of Vermeer, the classic artist Vermeer is painted as both a human and as a table. It's almost like the three association word game that one plays with Freudian analysts. The Surrealist movement started in Paris, but spread all over Europe. It was heavily influenced by Freud, and Surrealists were concerned with painting illogical images which owe much to dreams. It's a reaction against the ordered, scientific and logical thinking of the Enlightenment. This picture, The Persistence of Memory, has the very striking feature of clocks melting like camembert cheese in the sun. Many think it's a way of saying that time is not permanent or rigid. Generally, Surrealism was a movement of the left, with revolutionary ideals. Dali was later to part company with the Surrealists, but he never was overly political. In later life he became a strong supporter of the Spanish dictator Franco. This picture, painted in 1937, is called The Enigma of Hitler. The towering mountains in the background dominate, and the tiny human figures are the last witnesses to a dying peace. The huge telephone drips blood, as if every phone call brings ever worse news. The British Prime Minister Chamberlain was famous both for his umbrella and his inability to contain Hitler. His umbrella here hangs from the tree, as useless as the policies that he followed. Hitler, for Dali, was someone who turned everything upside down. In 1937 it was clear that Hitler was murderous and would bring war to Europe, so it's surprising that this picture is called The Enigma of Hitler. This may indicate a certain apolitical stance than Dali. Dali spent the war years in America, returning to Europe after it was over. After the war, his work became more and more religious as he returned to the practice of his faith. This picture, The Temptation of St. Anthony, painted in 1946, is a theme often painted in art. In Dali's version, the saint has been walking through a desert when he is confronted by a monstrous horse and a team of elephants on stilt-like legs. There are also images of sexuality which the saint must oppose, using his cross to ward off the vision. Dali submitted this painting, the Madonna of Port Legate, which he painted in 1950 to Pope Pius XII for approval, which was granted. Dali created several versions of this painting. The paintings all depict a seated Madonna, posed by Dali's wife Gala, with the infant Jesus on her lap. Both figures have rectangular holes cut in their torsos, suggestive of their transcendent spiritual status. This picture, Crucifixion, was painted in 1954 and depicts the crucified Jesus on the net of a hypercube. A hypercube is a multi-dimensional version of a cube used in geometry. Gala, Dali's wife, is the figure in the bottom left who stands looking up to the crucified Jesus. Like his later Christ to St. John of the Cross, which we looked at on Sunday, there is no blood or nails here. Completed in 1955, after 9 months of work, Dali's painting The Sacrament of the Last Supper has remained one of his most popular compositions. It is almost like a scene from science fiction. Jesus is both present at the Last Supper and also above the table in an unbloody, crucified yet risen way. The 12 apostles are complemented by the fact that the room seems to be painted in a dodecahedron, a 12-sided geometric shape. The way Dali laid this out is reminiscent of Da Vinci's Last Supper, but here the disciples are not sharing a meal, they are worshipping as if at Mass. They kneel, as at the moment of consecration, or bow their heads. The title, The Sacrament of the Last Supper, makes the viewer aware that Dali is reading into the Last Supper his own Catholic theological view on the Eucharist. Dali said that the inspiration for this work, The Ascension of Christ, which he painted in 1958, came from a cosmic dream that he had in 1950. In the dream, which was in vivid colour, he saw the nucleus of an atom, which we see as the background of the painting. The feet of Christ point out at the viewer, drawing the eye inwards along his body to the centre of the atom behind him. The atom is the same interior structure as the head of a sunflower. As with most of Dali's other paintings of Christ, his face is not visible. Above the Christ is Gala, her eyes wet with tears, possibly playing the role here of the Virgin Mary. And so we turn to Dali's most famous work, the one we looked at on Sunday, Christ to St. John of the Cross. In this figure, Jesus is on the cross, but not held there by nails. There is no blood, so it's very different to the normal crucifixion scene that you normally see in art. The bay is the bay where Dali lived, and the painting itself was inspired by a drawing preserved in the convent of the Incarnation in Avila in Spain, and done by St. John of the Cross himself, after he'd seen this vision of Christ during an ecstatic vision. At the bottom of his studies for this picture, Dali wrote, "In the first place, in 1950, I had a cosmic dream in which I saw this image in colour, and which my dream represented the nucleus of the atom." The work was at first regarded as banal by art critics when it was first exhibited in London, and when it was bought by Glasgow Art Gallery, it was denounced as a massive waste of money. More recently, the Spanish government offered £80 million to buy it back, an offer which was wisely turned down. The picture arouses strong feelings, and it was attacked by a fanatic who slashed it while it was hanging in the Glasgow Museum a few years ago, proof of its astonishing effect on people. The work is of a dual perspective. The perspective of God looking down at the Son on the cross, and the perspective of the world carrying on as if nothing is happening with the everyday tasks of living and fishing. On Sunday we reflected on this dual perspective as a metaphor for the coming kingdom which has been inaugurated by Christ but which isn't here yet. We live between the perspective of the world and the perspective of the coming kingdom. In Dali's painting, these perspectives merge at the foot of the cross. This is where our perspectives about the kingdom merge too, and our reflection on these perspectives is helped as we look at this painting by Dali.